Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihin kareem. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has created mankind, created insan, and also who has created mankind for a purpose. And in this world, as we understand that just like how we have the children of Adam, Allah has honored the children of Adam. There are many people, whether they are Muslim or non-Muslim. Part of our living in this world is to understand a people's rights. How that the Creator, when He has sent Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the final messenger, and He has also given us guidelines how to give rights to many people. And from amongst the rights of a people are those who are the prisoners. And to discuss about prisoners, we have one of our, we could say, member of the community here in South London, our brother Shakur Amir. And to discuss about Shakur Amir, who is the last British resident in Guantanamo, we have a very special guest here in the studio, John Mcdonnell, and he is an MP of Hayes and Harlington. So indeed, we are grateful to you, John, for coming and taking out your special time, obviously, despite your very busy schedule, to be with us here in the late part of the night. But firstly, before we discuss about Shakur Amir, it will be very interesting for our viewers to know a little bit background about yourself, how many years you are there in the House of Commons, and also about the area where you are in, in Hayes and Harlington.
Okay. Well, first of all, Assalamu alaikum
Alaikum
to
salam.
yourself and all the viewers. I'm a Labour Member of Parliament in Hayes and Harlington, which is a West London constituency around Heathrow Airport. It's a typical London constituency, really, working class community, very diverse, for a whole range of different people who've moved into the area over the last century. Most of them migrants. My family from an Irish background, so we were migrants in the 1920s and 30s. And then after that, in my community, we've had migrants literally across the world. There's quite a sizable Muslim population within Hayes and Harlington, originally from Pakistan, but now also from all parts of Africa. North Africa and East Africa in particular. And I've lived in my community now for nearly 40 years, and active like everyone else who goes into politics. Really, I was active within the local community as a community activist, working on all different community campaigns. I was a trade union representative as well, and then decided, in some ways, when you want to change things, when you want to improve things, you recognise actually that politics is one route in which you start changing things and improving your community. So I joined the Labour Party, and then, like everything else in any other voluntary organisation, if you're active, suddenly you get given a job, don't you? And any other small voluntary organisation, they'll want someone who wants to be the secretary or deliver the leaflets or whatever. And that's how I got active in my local Labour Party. Then eventually, people asked me what I stand for. I stood for the Greater London Council. I used to be the deputy leader of London. Ken Livingstone was the leader of the GLC, and I was the deputy leader. And then after that, that was abolished. And after that, professionally, I worked for trade unions and in local government. And then I stood for election in 1997 in my constituency and was elected as the MP. And I've been in Parliament now, 17 years. And it's a great community. It's like many London communities. It's a diverse community, and we get on well together. People help one another. There isn't a time when, if there's an issue in my community, I can't go to the local mosque, the local church, or the local gurdwara, and people work really hard together. And I'm quite proud of it, very proud of it.
Yes, indeed. That's really pleasing to know that, for 17 years, so that means you have with you many years of experience. And also, in your locality, do you find that most of the people are politically active, engaging with you, the Muslim community especially?
Yeah, what's interesting is that if there's an issue, if there's a problem within our community, I can convene a meeting, and those meetings, people say, people don't like going to meetings these days. If I convene a meeting about a particular issue, people will turn up, absolutely turn up. At the local mosque, the mosque is just across the road from my office. I helped set the mosque up. We only had a small Muslim community about 30 years ago, and when I was active as a GLC councillor, there was no mosque. So a number of the Muslim families came to see me. We looked for a site, we approached the local council, and we found a site, and that became the first mosque in the history of our area. And it's been incredibly successful. We now have 3 mosques, and again, they're all working together. Whenever I need assistance if, say, for example, there's an issue in our area about antisocial behaviour or an environmental problem, I can go along to the local mosque, invite people to come and join me in those campaigns, and then they'll join me. I'll give you a good example. When during the summer, unfortunately, the attacks on Gaza took place, I convened a meeting in my constituency office. We have a hall next to it, and I wanted to have a proper discussion about what was happening. Within 48 hours, we called a meeting. 200 people turned up, and of all faiths, of all cultures and backgrounds, working together to secure peace. And we launched a campaign within our local community. The youngsters set up a website, and they were using Twitter and all the rest. We had a demonstration, particularly within our area, in support of Palestinians. We toured around shops. We launched our own boycott campaign of Israeli goods coming from the occupied territories. And that just showed to me that actually when you call for support, people are there. And of course, the mosques, the Muslim community supported it, but it was also the other religious communities and the other communities within the area too, because they saw it as an injustice. It just shows you how people can work together.
That is amazing. I mean, to hear that the people and the community, and also your role that you played to establish that first mosque. I'm sure many people will be really surprised to learn this. What we'd like to know also at the same time, given that Muslims generally have a lot of challenges that they are facing, and especially in today's time, while the world and the news and every day in the papers, what happened in Paris, and all these things. I mean, Muslims here, it's like whatever happens in another part of the world, it does have an impact on the community that are living here. So what do you find generally the Muslim community, how are handling this type of challenges that they are facing? Because generally you note that Muslims want to peacefully coexist.
Yeah. Well, the whole concept of the Islamic faith is peace anyway. What I've found is, I'll give you an example of the local mosques within my area. Whenever we've had a problem, an issue come up, and take what's happening in France overall. Already the fortnight before, there'd been an open day at the local mosque, where the local community had been able to visit the mosque, be shown round and explained about what the Islamic religion is about and how the local mosque works for the wider community. So there's always been a process of integration in the local community. And I think in that way, the local Muslims have gained significant respect. And also, local Muslims have entered into the political process within my area. The leader of the Labour group, it's not, my council is Conservative controlled, but has a very large Labour group. The leader of the Labour group is a Muslim. And so we have a number of Muslim councillors and community activists who've worked incredibly hard in the community. They've won the respect of the community and therefore have been elected and gained that political support. So there's an element of political engagement which enables not just the Muslim voice to be heard, but also the recognition that actually Muslim councillors are representing everybody. When issues like, tragedies like in Paris come along, the community holds together. Yes. The first statements of sympathy come from the local Muslim community. At the same time, I have to say that I was in the mosque on Friday night. I do a monthly surgery advice session in the local mosque where people can come along with their problems, etc. And it just enables people to access their local MP and raise problems there.
Amazing.
But when I was having the discussion with the elders, if you like, the trustees of the mosque committee there, they were saying, look, we, like everyone, we're shocked and horrified at what went on. But also, people say, look, we don't have to apologise for this. That's nothing to do with us. We shouldn't have to apologise for what these, well, to be frank, criminals undertook. This has nothing to do with us. This has nothing to do with our religion. These people are not practicing anything that relates to our religion whatsoever. So I thought that was quite a robust statement, and it reflected a considered view that people increasingly know what Islam stands for. Yes, it's a religion of peace. So therefore, if there is individuals who claim to be pursuing the Islamic faith and committing violence like this, mainstream Muslims are saying quite clear, this has got nothing to do with us.
So there needs generally and more awareness education, because what is really greatly lacking is, given that 1.5 maybe billion Muslims in every part of the world, wherever they are, obviously they are following the Prophet Muhammad,
Yes.
peace be upon him. So what we really need is to have more awareness. Who is this man? Why is so many people have to, because part of the religion of Islam is really to display an unconditional love for the Prophet. And hence people will want to react and keep on trying to display that love for the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So there will be those, even though we know that the Creator God Almighty has elevated the status of the Prophet, but it's quite difficult to control the emotions of many of the people,
Yes, of course.
because they feel that a wrong image has been depicted of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But anyway, that was really good introduction. Now we want you to share with us, given that we have set up something very special in Parliament, and that is about the last British resident in Guantanamo. So it'll be interesting just to know what has led you to set up this parliamentary group.
Well, basically there's been, as you know, because you're part of the campaign, there's been a group of really heroic people who've been working over the years trying to explain what's happened to Shakur. And as you know, because you're part of this story in particular, and what they've tried to do is get the story out there of how this innocent man, charity worker, goes to Afghanistan when Afghans needed support. He goes there, what to do, to build schools, to sink wells so that villagers have water. So absolutely following his belief in Islam as a religion of giving and support. A charity worker goes along there, and we know now that when after 9/11 the bombing of Afghanistan happened, he sent his family to Pakistan to safety and was to follow them. Unfortunately, was then taken by Afghan villagers, sold on to the Northern League, the warlords, and then sold on to the Americans at a time when they were paying a price on people's heads. And so people were making a profit out of selling on an innocent man. He then gets tortured and sent to Guantanamo Bay. And he's been there for over a decade. Now, there's been a group of people who've been campaigning, you're one of them, to expose what's went on and to try and secure his release. Over the years, they've provided briefings to members of Parliament, and we've been trying to raise it in Parliament. But we got to the stage, really, where we thought, well, this isn't happening. He's still there. His children are growing up. Yes, he was a British resident, but his family are British citizens. And as MPs representing the British Parliament, we have a responsibility to take this matter up. And so for that grassroots campaign, have come to us and said, look, what can you do as MPs? And what we've done is we've set up a parliamentary group, a group of MPs from all political parties participating now. We've been putting pressure on the UK government to say, you need to represent Shakur because he's a British resident, his family have got all British citizenship. They should be representing him to secure his release from Guantanamo. We now know that David Cameron, the Prime Minister, the UK Prime Minister, is visiting Washington this week. And we also know from the press reports today that he's committed himself to raising the case with Barack Obama. Now, Shakur's, he's been cleared for release twice now. Barack Obama should just let him come home.
I mean, given that obviously this has been dragging on for so long, what do you feel, I mean, what is the delay?
Oh.
How is it, even though he's been cleared for release twice, so most of the community, why they are feeling upset? Over 117,000 people have signed the petition.
The support is extraordinary.
Yes.
And also, what's interesting in these recent months, as a result of the campaign, in most of the national newspapers now, there's been a story about Shakur, exposing what's been going on, and supporting his release. So we now have a huge number of people within the UK population supporting release. We have MPs of all political parties. It's now consistently raised in Parliament, and we know that both the Prime Minister and the British Foreign Secretary has been raising the case with the Americans. So there's overwhelming support in this country. So the dilemma is, which are most of it is difficult to understand, why hasn't he been released already? Why isn't he released immediately? And we've been trying to fathom what is at stake here. And I think it's this, and you can become a conspiracy theory on some of this, but I think it's starkly obvious now that the reason Shakur has been held back is because he's one of the ones who's exposed what's happened in terms of torture. Now, he's been saying that for a number of years. His lawyers have been raising this issue about how people who, on their way to Guantanamo Bay when they were detained by the Americans, were tortured, and by the Pakistani authorities. How, when they were in Guantanamo Bay, they were tortured brutally, for some, unfortunately, who lost their lives as well. Shakur, in the early years, is one of those people who stood up and tried to expose that. And when they set up a prisoners' council within Guantanamo Bay, he was the spokesperson for the other prisoners. So I think one of the reasons he's not been released is because he's been prominent in exposing the issue of torture. The Americans denied torture up until very recently, but only a month ago we saw the report by Congress and we saw what came out, which was a complete exposure of the scale of the torture that went on. So Shakur has been proved right on that aspect. The other issue, which I think is more worrying, is that when Shakur was tortured, we now know from his experience that after being tortured, he was questioned, not just by the Americans, but we now know that there was UK government intelligence services involved in that as well. So MI5, MI6. And he's consistently said that. He's been tortured both in Pakistan and by the Pakistanis and by the Americans, but at the end of it, he was also interrogated by British intelligence officers. So I think part of the reason that they've tried to keep him in is because he can expose all that. And when he comes out, when he's able to tell his full story, he will expose both what's been happening in Guantanamo Bay, what happened to him before that, but the implication of not just the American intelligence services, but also the British. And I think I suppose you could describe him as a whistleblower. He's blown the whistle on all the wrongdoings of both states, and I think that's why he's been victimized in this way.
So it is very clear that given that Shakur Amir is a British resident, his wife and children British citizen, and I mean, how do we justify a person who is cleared for release? He has never seen his young son Faris 13 years. And this year, we believe it is 800th year anniversary of the Magna Carta. So it'd be useful just to see how do we, reconcile between, human rights, universal rights of human, Declaration of Human Rights, and also the Magna Carta, and given that Shakur Amir is 13 years now in Guantanamo.
It's ironic, isn't it? We're celebrating Magna Carta, 800 years. One of the essential elements in law that came from Magna Carta was the concept of habeas corpus, that someone cannot be detained without a trial and without the decision of a court. Shakur Amir has had no decision made against him whatsoever. As you say, cleared for release twice and still detained. It's an absolute abuse of human rights itself, and it's a stain. It isn't just a stain on the American system, it's a stain on the UK government as well, because we've had consistent governments who've actually, although they've raised the case with the Americans, have not been forceful enough to secure his release. And we've seen over the last year or so, well, first of all, when Barack Obama was elected, he said he closed down Guantanamo Bay completely. He hasn't done that yet. It's a disappointment to us and a lot of Americans as well, a lot of the people who supported him. But we've also seen over the last year large numbers of prisoners being released from Guantanamo Bay. Some of those prisoners that have been released have acknowledged track records in terms of some form of association with terrorist activity. Shakur's never been associated with any of that as well. Here's the irony, isn't it, that here's a man who's gone out to do charitable works, was well respected in the wider community for the work that he was doing, and yet he's the one, could be one of the last citizens, one of the last people, prisoners released from Guantanamo Bay. It's a scandal. I feel for his family. Like you, you know, he's grown up, his children are growing up without seeing their father. That's appalling.
So, and this is what the worry is, because, Shakir's mother, she's very ill,
Yeah.
in Medina, in Saudi Arabia, and also his brother passed away. And here is somebody who is in a prison, isolated, tortured,
Yes.
and he's been on hunger strike, and years have gone by. So nobody knows what is going to happen tomorrow. Our great worry and concern is if we delay and if he's not released, we don't want to hear that, for example, Shakir has passed away in Guantanamo. This will be a great tragedy.
Well, we know his health has been affected badly
Yes.
by the torture and by the detention. And for 5 years he was in solitary occupation as well. He's solitary isolation imprisonment. And again, that has an effect. I've been involved, I've visited constituents in prison. I was involved in a famous case in this country called the Guildford 4 case, which was a group of young Irish people who spent 15 years in prison for a crime they never committed. When they came out, they were institutionalized, they had mental health issues, and none of them have actually recovered from that experience. Now, I think Shakur has been extremely strong all the way through this period, but there's not many people on this planet who've actually suffered the way he has, not just by the detention, by the solitary, that isolation in solitary cells, and then by the physical torture. We know that physical torture goes on because he's being roughed up every time they search his cell. There's multiple cell searches, and that's part of the way of destabilizing him. But that inability to communicate with another human being by being isolated in solitary confinement, I think is absolutely appalling.
Yes, indeed. And what we would like is, as we are coming closer to the break, there are many people here in the UK that know about Shakir Amir's case, and it's like, should they give up? Should they continue?
Yeah.
Because most of these demonstrations and most of these virtuals that are taking place are really led by many non-Muslims. So we have the Save Shakir Amir campaign, and we have Stand with Shakir. And you yourself have delivered a letter, I believe, to David Cameron.
Yeah, we went to number 10 with a letter and delivered the petitions. Interesting enough, we had a lot of support from right the way across the community, but quite a large number of prominent individuals, actors, singers. So people within all walks of society now have been raised, not just the lawyers, but people right the way across all different walks of life now have really, I suppose they've been offended by what's gone on. They cannot, it's the question you asked, they cannot understand why he's not been released.
Yes.
There's an element of disappointment, a bit of anger as well, that the UK government hasn't been forceful enough. But I think the momentum that has been built up by people campaigning now has put such immense pressure on the UK government. As I say, I think the British Prime Minister now realises he's got to deliver on this. Okay. And I'm hoping that he will. I think we can't let our guard drop. We've got to make sure that we maintain the momentum of the campaign. And that is about people getting involved in the campaign by contacting their local MP, saying asking their local MP to join the group that we've set up in Parliament, asking the local MP.
So you think this will be something good even to put, manifesto or for the next election?
Yes, yeah.
The local candidates, people need to question them and ask them what have they done for Guantanamo to have it even shut down.
I think we've got a general election in May. Every candidate that wants to stand now, the wider community has got to be asking that question of all the candidates, asking maybe all the candidates in that particular constituency to jointly sign up to a statement supporting Shakur. That would demonstrate solidarity right the way across the political spectrum.
Yes, indeed. And here we have John McDonnell, MP for Hayes and Harlington, who has been working tirelessly and also supporting this great noble cause to help and try to speed up the release of Shakir Amir. So it needs to be pointed out very clear, Shakir Amir, he is cleared for release 2007 and again in 2010. No charge, no trial. He should have been with his family many years ago, like how Muazzam Beg was released. But we will continue our discussion after the break, and you can also call in. Please remain tuned. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.